these three modes are described by Lord Krishna. And what he does is, he first tells you what is the long-term impact if you're under the influence of each of these three modes. The long-term impact, for example, if you're in the Sattva gun, you're going to go to the upper planetary systems. In the long-term impact of being under the influence of Rajagun is you'll come to the middle planetary systems. And then the long-term impact of being under the mode of ignorance, you'll have to go down to the lower species or lower planetary systems. Then Krishna also talks about the medium-term impact and the short-term impact as well. So if you read carefully, if you are in the medium-term impact, then Krishna talks about how, I'll tell you which shlokas it is actually. Shlokas 14 to 18. So the long-term impact we understood, which is your final destination. What is your final destination? The intermediate or medium-term impact is, for example, you can look at if you're under the influence of Rajogun, then Krishna says the phalam tu dukkham, which means the result is some amount of anxiety. That's your result. Similarly, the medium-term impact for being under the mode of goodness is some amount of happiness, like that. And then the short-term impact, for example, if you're in the mode of passion, you're always active. There is no conscious planning happening when you're under the mode of passion. So like this, we're constantly under the influence of these three gunas. We discussed that in the mode of goodness, generally, you reflect first and then you take action. Whereas in the mode of action, you act first and then you reflect. In the mode of ignorance, you neither reflect nor act because you're completely under the mode of ignorance, illusion. So this is the flow of the shlokas. And Krishna also reminds us that we are not the doers. What does that mean we are not the doers? Because we are the ones making the decisions, right? We choose to either be under the influence of Rajagun or Tamagun or Sattvagun. So that's our choice. So Chaitanya Charan Prabhu was explaining that we are forced to do as we choose to desire. The minute we choose a desire, then we are forced to act according to that desire that we're trying to fulfill. So once you choose the desire, then you are actually forced to act based on that desire. So in a sense, you lose some control. Of course, you can always change direction. So Krishna says one way to really control this and bring it under subjugation is you have to go beyond the three modes. And that will break the cycle of birth and death for you. And Krishna says in Shloka 20 that those who actually understand how these three modes influence us, they can transcend this cycle of birth and death. Then Arjuna asks three questions. What are the characteristics of this person who has transcended the three modes? What is their behavior? And then finally, how did they end up transcending three modes? So in response to these three questions, shlokas 22 to 26, Krishna walks him through the influence, the symptoms, the behavior, and the process. And the process is practicing Bhakti Yoga. So essentially, Krishna is saying, when the influence of the modes comes, we shouldn't get carried away by it. We should take a step back and observe ourselves and see what is it that we are actually trying to do here. So an element of self-discipline and self-discovery. So we talked about the analogy of an umpire, right? An umpire in a cricket match has to be disinterested but not uninterested. Uninterested means not very observant, not worrying about the goings on. So he has to be interested because he has to declare the result. But he has to be disinterested because he cannot be vested in the outcome. So sometimes the players appeal a particular decision. And what does the umpire do? The umpire reviews that video again and then takes a final call. So either he may reverse his previous decision or he sticks to his previous decision. So we should have this level of detachment to actually observe ourselves. This is actually important. But if you're in the mode of ignorance, let's say you are extremely addicted to alcohol, then for you the only choice is, should I drink beer or should I drink wine or whatever it is, gin and tonic or whatever it is. The choice is not, should I drink or should I not drink. So that is the problem we talked about, right? When you have too many choices, you actually believe that you have freedom simply because you have many choices. But in reality, you don't have freedom. Maybe your freedom was to not drink at all. Maybe your freedom was not to buy a car at all. So Chaitanya Charan Prabhu was saying that our greatest illusion is when we are chasing happiness, we lose happiness in that chase. So that is the mystical nature of this. That our happiness, in pursuit of happiness, we end up becoming terribly unhappy. And that is the illusion. So he was saying that the search for happiness is often the cause of greatest unhappiness. So if you're in the mode of ignorance and you're making decisions in that mode, then the decisions that you're making is also going to cause you to go deeper into the mode of ignorance, be fully entrapped. So then when Arjuna asked, how do we know that this person has actually transcended three modes on the transcendental platform? Krishna says such a person is equipoised. They will experience happiness and distress, but they don't respond to it. And Chaitanya Charan Prabhu was saying, we cannot simply wish away our experiences, right? We cannot deny the emotions that we are feeling, but we should at the same time not get carried away by our emotions. When you don't get carried away by your emotions and you're almost like a cold, calculated view of who you are, then you can transcend the impacts of the three modes. And then Krishna concludes by saying that if you become my devotee, you can easily transcend these three modes and you can ultimately come to the platform of pure bhakti. Right? And so essentially what is Krishna saying? Through self-discipline, through self-discovery and devotion, we can transcend the three modes. If you're not ready to do devotional activity, at a minimum, we should focus on self-discipline and self-discovery. In that process, if we discover Krishna and we start practicing devotional service, then you have a greater opportunity to transcend the three modes. So this is a summary of chapter 14. The acronym for this was TRAP. So if you understand the problem, you understand the potential to overcome it, and you understand the process to overcome it. So the three P's. What is the problem? What is the potential to address it? And what is the process to address it? So this is a summary of chapter 14. So let's begin chapter 15. This is chapter 15. Chapter 15. Okay. So chapter 15 is titled Purushottama Yoga, which is the yoga of the Supreme Person. So in this chapter, Krishna will talk about, continue his topic of if you're practicing devotional service, how you can reach the platform of liberation. He will talk again about the material world, about the spiritual world, and the process to transcend this. Before we begin, let's offer our humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yeah. So it's a very interesting chapter because of one of the metaphors or analogies that Krishna uses in the beginning of the chapter. The question for us is, we are residing in this hotel, in this prison. Do we want to stay in this hotel or do we want to go back to our original home? And Krishna talks about the way in which you can get back to that original home by using the analogy of an upside down banyan tree, Ashwata. The word Ashwata means banyan. The word Ashwata also has another meaning. The word Ashwata also means that which is not permanent, that which is temporary, that which will come to an end at some point in time. So what are the options that we have to get out of this banyan tree? Who is actually maintaining everything? And what is the essence? In this chapter, there is a 3-verse summary of the entire Vedanta Sutra that Vyasadeva wrote. So Krishna summarizes the entire Vedanta Sutra in shlokas 16 to 18, which is a summary understanding of all of the Vedas, the Vedic scriptures. So if you want to get out of this prison, or if you want to go from the hotel to home, and you've lost your way, you don't know where home is, then we could use the analogy of using a GPS. Turn your GPS tracker on, put the destination in, and pretty soon you're on your way to going back to the spiritual world. So the single word summary for today is GPS. What is this GPS? This GPS is the Vedas. So Krishna has talked about the influence of the gunas, how they force us to accumulate karma, karmic reactions. Now he's going to talk about the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, because if you follow the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas and you're not interested in performing Karma Yoga, how can you get out of this prison? So the acronym for today, or the single word summary or acronym for today, is Global Positioning System, GPS. And what is this GPS? Simply following the Vedic scriptures. If you can't practice bhakti, if you can't practice karma yoga, you're interested in, you have so many desires and you want to fulfill them, then at a minimum you should be following the prescribed duties as per the Vedic injunctions. So that is what this chapter is all about. But I'll just draw out the actual analogy shortly here. So the question is, do we want to go home or do we want to stay in the hotel? If we want to go home, what are the options we have? How Krishna says, okay, you may not believe that I am the Supreme Lord. You may not believe that there is another spiritual world. But at least if you believe in this earth, through careful observation and by following the scriptures, ultimately you will come to the realization that there is another place called home. Because you have simply accepted the hotel as being your permanent residence. And Krishna uses the cosmos to give you examples of how he is the one who's maintaining us, maintaining everything. So he will use analogies that he's the sun, he's the moon, he's the fire of digestion, etc. Then the essence of all of the Vedanta Sutras is in 3 verses, 16 to 18. So the question for us is home or hotel? Hotel may look very luxurious, but home is where the heart is. Hotel, you really cannot associate with the Lord if you're living in the hotel. You're separated from Him because you're too busy with other activities that a luxurious hotel can offer you, or any kind of hotel can offer you. So we have to make up our mind, do we want to stay in this prison hotel or do we want to go back? And if you want to go back home, Krishna is chalking out the path. So, so here Krishna begins chapter 1 with this particular shloka. Shri Bhagavan urdhvamulam madashakam ashvattam prahuram avyayam chandamsi yasya parnani yastam vedasa vedavid. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So in the very first shloka, Krishna is introducing the Vedas to us, the Vedic hymns. But if you observe the image on the screen carefully, this banyan tree is real. What is not real is the reflection of the banyan tree in the water. And what are we doing? How are we spending our time? We are spending our time in the reflection, thinking that it is real. It's like trying to pluck a mango from the reflection of the tree in the water. And you keep searching for it, you dive into the water thinking the mango is deeper inside. And you don't understand that that was just a mirage. That was just an illusion. The real mango is on the tree, it's not in the water. So Krishna says, this entire Prakriti is Maya Devi, that which is not. So you are searching for that bliss in a place where it does not exist. But let's say you are preoccupied with satisfying your desires. Then how, by using this tree of the Vedas, you can come back to the root and climb your way upwards. So this is how Lord Krishna begins this particular chapter, by talking about the fact that we are caught up with the image of the upside down banyan tree. And we are constantly going through various branches and trees in search of that bliss. But that bliss is actually not there on that tree. But Krishna is saying in this chapter, but if you choose to follow the Vedas properly, ultimately you'll reach the conclusion that that mango never existed in this tree. The mango is elsewhere. And using that knowledge of the Vedas, you can know how to exit this prison. One is you have an option of practicing Bhakti Yoga to exit. Two is you can practice Karma Yoga nicely and ultimately you will get connected to Bhakti Yoga. Now, three is you understand this transcendental knowledge of how I have actually set up this material cosmos. And simply by understanding how this cosmos works, your illusion will be dispelled and ultimately you will go back through the process of simply strictly adhering to the Vedic scriptures. The process is outlined in the Vedic scriptures to come to the platform where you ask yourself, I want moksha. Why am I suffering? So this is a summary view of the chapter, right? In the Gunas chapter, we saw the shackles that bind us. There is no difference. A shackle is a shackle. It may be a gold shackle, it may be a silver shackle, it may be an iron shackle. It doesn't matter. So the quality of your prison cell hardly matters because you're still stuck in prison. This is something that we need to understand. So how do we free ourselves from this reflection, this false, like a mirage it is? First of all, you have to understand who you are. And by detachment, you can practice detachment by attaching yourself to Krishna and then giving up your lordship over material nature. So when Mother Yashoda finds out that Krishna has been very naughty and she starts hearing so many complaints from all the gopis, she thinks, I need to discipline this child. If I don't discipline him now, he will grow up to be a wayward child. Who will marry him if he conducts himself this way? In the beginning, Mother Yashoda never believes any of the stories being told by the gopis, that he's broken into their house, he's stolen the butter, he's broken pots and made a mess everywhere, he's urinated in the puja room. None of this she's willing to believe. And then finally, all the gopis come together in a conclave and tell Mother Yashoda one after the other all the things that Krishna has been doing. She never believed that her Lala could be so naughty. So imagine the love of Mother Yashoda wanting to discipline Purushottama. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, she wanted to discipline him. And Damodar month is coming up, so she does try. She binds him to the mortar out of love and anger that he should learn a lesson, that he cannot continue to do all this mischief. So we need to understand that in the earlier chapter, the mode of goodness, the impact of the two byproducts of the mode of goodness is sukha and jnana, right? One is happiness and one is knowledge. This is a symptom of those who are in the mode of goodness. But Krishna knows that for those who are on the sattva gun platform, it is a perfect launching pad for bhakti. But then he also knows that some people who are in the mode of sattva gun will reject God. There may be a lot of atheists who are in the mode of sattva gun. So what is the way out for them? If they don't accept the supremacy of the Lord, they don't believe in the supreme controller, the supreme enjoyer, how do they break this chain then? What is the option for them? Do they have a choice or not? So in the previous chapter, Krishna concludes by saying that practicing devotional service, gradually, the practicing sadhana bhakti, gradually you will come to the platform of understanding who you are and what's your relationship with the Supreme Lord and what is the process you need to follow. So this is called, one of the stages of bhakti is called anartha nivritti. Anartha nivritti means, the word anartha means useless things or unwanted things. The word vritti means inclination. And if you add the prefix nivritti means you don't have an inclination. So when you begin practicing bhakti yoga, you come to one of the stages that you come to is called anartha nivritti, which means you give up your attachment to useless things and useless activities. So then you're steady on the path of bhakti. Slowly you lose interest in things that have no meaning and no permanent consequence for you. So this anartha nivritti means you have reached that stage of detachment by attaching yourself to your sadhana, to Krishna, you following the ABCD formula. By this, you come to the platform of detachment, and of course, the natural outcome of detachment is you no longer chase material things. You give up lordship over material things. So there is a saying that in is the only way out. What is this in is the only way out? The only way you can get out of this anxiety-laden life is by going within you, transforming yourself. So in is the only way out. So you have to transform your senses, your mind, your intelligence. You have to address your false ego. There is an interesting pastime. There was a very, very wealthy businessman known as Lala Babu a few hundred years ago. He was very wealthy, and but he was also a devotee of the Lord. So he was trying to practice mixed bhakti, which is trying to enjoy his wealth while simultaneously trying to be a devotee of Krishna. So one day he had organized a play or something like that, and the public had come to attend the play, and there was a father with a young daughter. The young daughter tells the father, "I'm tired, I want to go back home." Hearing this, "I am tired, I want to go back home," he overhears the child saying this, "I am tired, I want to go back home. I don't want to see this play anymore." It triggers a thought in him suddenly that he has wasted all his life. There is indeed another home, the spiritual world, that he has accepted this material world as permanent, and he has lost sight of what is important. So what does he do? He quickly decides that he wants to give away all his wealth and come to the platform of practicing Bhakti Yoga. So that's exactly what he does. He gives up all his wealth, comes to Vrindavan and searches for a guru. And he finds a guru that he is ready to accept. His name is Krishnadas. But every time he would go to this personality that he wanted to accept as a guru, that person would say, "No, you're not ready." Now, this gentleman, Lala Babu, was puzzled. How can you say I'm not ready? I've given up all my wealth to come and practice exclusively Bhakti Yoga, and that too in Vrindavan. But Krishnadas, no matter how many times Lala Babu would go and beg him and plead with him, "Please accept me as your disciple. Please accept me as your disciple." The guru would say, "You're not ready." And one day he tells Lala Babu, "You're not humble enough to accept a guru." And he's puzzled. "What do you mean you're not humble enough?" See, his mood was, "Look at me. I was a rich man. I gave up everything to try and practice Bhakti Yoga." That was his mood. And his guru rejects him consistently because he knew that this was the thought in this person's mind, and he wanted to make sure that he gives that thought up also before he can take to the process of practicing full Bhakti Yoga. So you see, externally you may give up everything. Internally, if you're still thinking, "What a great person I am. I gave up all my wealth. Look at me, trying to practice Bhakti Yoga." So the guru can find out your nefarious thoughts, the thoughts that actually contaminate you. And there's just no way he would have made progress as long as he was thinking. So the guru told him, "You go beg for Krishna from somebody else." The guru tells him, "You are not humble. You've not given up your attachment to how great you are or are." So what does he do? He had a friend who was also a very wealthy businessman and also a devotee of Krishna. And it was the habit of this friend to offer charity every day in the morning. So this friend, as usual, was offering charity, and a whole big queue had lined up to accept whatever it is that this gentleman, the other businessman, was giving out in charity. And so this Lala Babu also stands in line. And when he reaches his friend is shocked. He's saying, "What are you doing here? Why are you in these clothes? What do you want?" And his friend, Lala Babu, begs him. He says, "You have love for Krishna. Can you give it to me?" "I don't have love for Krishna. I only want love for Krishna from you. Can you give it to me?" And his friend is so transfixed by what Lala Babu had said, begging him, "Give me love for Krishna because you possess it, I don't possess it." And his friend says, "Even I don't have it." So dejected, Lala Babu turns around and begins to walk away. And who does he see? His spiritual master standing there. He says, "Now you've come to the right platform," and he initiates him into Bhakti Yoga. So like this, there are a lot of other pastimes also of Lala Babu. So we need to understand how we can use knowledge, Krishna says, to cut. Knowledge, Krishna says in this chapter, is the weapon that can help you cut your attachments to this material world. Cut away the illusion. So by the weapon of knowledge, you can understand that there is a difference between the body and the soul. The tree is actually getting nourished. That reflection that you see is simply being nourished by the three material modes. The tree itself is imperishable, Krishna says. The original tree is imperishable, the Prakriti. But we are caught up in its reflection. So the minute we attain some knowledge of what is actually reality and what is illusion, then we begin our journey, from the upside down tree, we work our way upwards until we reach the platform of spirituality. So then Krishna talks about what are the qualifications that are required to become detached from this material world. So he uses the word vinivritta kama. So again, which is, he says, if you give up all of your lust, completely, vinivritta kama. Vritta means again inclination, but nivritta means no inclination. Vinivritta means completely giving up all your lustful tendencies. So what is the opposite of this being attached to materialistic desires? It is called artha pravritti. Artha pravritti means you are attached to doing that which is on the spiritual platform. Focus on the positive. Your inclinations should move from the negative to the positive. So in Shastra, if you read Shastra, you'll come across this terminology often. Pravritti marg and nivritti marg. Pravritti marg means those who are following materialistic tendencies. They're interested in desires. That is called pravritti marg. Nivritti marg means those who are practicing spirituality. They have rejected everything else. They have rejected materialism. They are focused on pleasing Krishna. So these are the only two margs there are, pravritti marg and nivritti marg. Either you satisfy yourself or you satisfy Krishna. So then Krishna talks in these shlokas from 6 to 11 about the transmigration of the soul, how it acquires body after body. And we'll just read, actually this chapter is very short, it has just 20 shlokas. So we can just read the shlokas quickly. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows the tree is the knower of the Vedas. The branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. And then Krishna says, the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down the strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Therefore, thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So Acharyas also say that this material world is like a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. So this material world is equivalent to the reflection of the banyan tree. The real world is the spiritual world. So that's the analogy that is being used here. Krishna says you must understand that you should seek the real world, going to which you will never have to come back. But what is that process? Surrender. Then, what are the qualifications to become detached? Krishna says, those who are free from false prestige. This Lala Babu was actually falsely pretentious, right? I've given up everything, but look at me, I've given up everything. So those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who unbewildered know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. That eternal kingdom is the spiritual world. So Krishna says the person who's completely done with all material desires, they are free from dualities, they are not bewildered by things that happen to them, they're done with false ego, they are the ones who will surrender and go back to that eternal kingdom. Now, Krishna says, again, he talks about the spiritual world. He said that supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or the moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. So Krishna is stating that although the sun and moon is also there in the spiritual world, it is not the light emanating from the sun or the moon that is actually illuminating the spiritual world. It is actually the effulgence that's coming out from the Lord's body itself that illuminates all of the spiritual cosmos. Now, Krishna makes an important statement. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts, meaning we are always part and parcel of Krishna, we have just separated from him. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. The living entity in the material world carries these different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. So Prabhupada used to use a wonderful analogy. He would say, let's say air passes over a garbage dump. Then it is not going to smell very good. That same air, if it passes over a field of roses, then the smell is very, very pleasant. So why is Krishna using this analogy of the air carrying the aromas? It means you are carrying so much desires from prior lives, you are trying to keep coming back here to try and fulfill them. You are carrying all of these vasanas with you from one body to another. And Krishna says, thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects, which means Krishna is saying, you will take a body according to your desire. No guarantee that you're going to take a human body. As per your desire, you will get a particular type of nose, mouth, ear, sense of touch, etc. And then Krishna says, the foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all of this. So we come back to the theme of Jnana Chakshu, the eyes of knowledge. So if you don't have knowledge, how are you going to be able to see? I forgot to give an example yesterday. How do you observe your moods and decide which is the one that you're going to come under the influence of? Chaitanya Charan Prabhu was using an analogy of a light in front of your front door. If somebody knocks on your door and if the light is on, you can see who is there before you decide whether you want to let them in or not. So this is that Jnana Chakshu, knowledge. If you have knowledge, you will know what decision to make. You will know how to not come under the trap of the three modes. So this is called Jnana Chakshu. Chakshu means eyes, the eyes of knowledge, to break free of this cycle. Then Krishna says the endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. So those who have this Jnana Chakshu, they can see things for what they are. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. Now, Krishna will give examples from the material cosmos to let those who are not developed in their minds about the concept of the Supreme to demonstrate to them that really as a Jivatma, you're completely dependent on me, even in this material cosmos. Why? Krishna says, I am the splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world. He's saying, this light comes from me. I am the splendor of the moon. I am the splendor of the fire. He says, all of this comes from me. Who do you think is giving you all of this? All of this are emanations from me that has come here to help you get out of this jail. So without me, you cannot even survive even in this material world. Krishna says, I enter into each planet and by my energy, they stay in orbit. So one may wonder, how can such heavy planets, large planets like Jupiter, Saturn, all of these huge, massive planets, how are they just floating in the air like that, floating in space? Krishna is saying, I'm keeping them aloft by my energy, because my energy has entered everything. So I think one of the Prabhujis, Sumit Prabhu or somebody was asking yesterday, why is there a Paramatma inside you? Without the Paramatma, you will not be able to survive. There are multiple functionalities of this Paramatma. His energy pervades every single atom in this universe. Krishna says, I become the moon and therefore thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. So Krishna says, this photosynthesis process helps the plants and trees grow, but actually it is the light of the moon that gives the taste of the vegetables and the fruits and the leaves. The importance of the moonlight. He's saying, do you not even know that the moonlight is actually supplying the taste, is giving that particular taste for that vegetable, along with Mother Earth. Then Krishna says, I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities. So the word that Krishna uses here is Vaivashnara. Vaivashnara is the demigod that takes care of digestion. Krishna is saying, even if you eat the food, you are dependent on me to digest that food also. You don't know this. Vaivashnara, fire of digestion. It's a demigod. So through that demigod, I am taking care of digestion for you. And then Krishna says, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of foodstuff. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. This is why Paramatma is there within you. Paramatma gives you remembrance, he gives you knowledge, and he also makes you forget. By all the Vedas, Krishna says, I am to be known. The ultimate objective of Vedanta is to know who's Lord Vishnu. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta and I am the knower of the Vedas. And then this 16 to 18 is a summary study of Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra means the end understanding, the synopsis, summary view of all of the Vedas is called Vedanta Sutra. These three shlokas are called the Trishloki Gita. The very first shloka, Krishna has talked about the Vedas. The summary understanding of the Vedas is in these three shlokas. First, there are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible. And in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. Kshara and Akshara. Fallible, infallible. So Krishna is saying there are only two classes of people, those who are perfect, those who are not perfect. This material cosmos is filled with imperfect people. The spiritual cosmos only has perfected living beings. So this is what I was talking about here yesterday, right? Nitya Siddha and Nitya Baddha. There are two categories of beings. The Nitya Siddha, they are eternally in the spiritual world. They never leave it. Never leave it. And for some reason, there are also this category called Nitya Baddha. They're constantly trying to come out for some reason, separating themselves from Krishna. Besides these two, which is the Nitya Siddha and the Nitya Baddha, besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, which is the Paramatma, the imperishable Lord himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. Then Krishna says, because I am transcendental, now he's referring to himself as Krishna. In the previous shloka 17, he's referencing to himself as Paramatma. In shloka 18, he's referencing to himself as Bhagavan. Because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami is what Lord Brahma writes in the Brahma Samhita. He is the ultimate, Govinda. He who brings pleasure to the cow, or he who brings pleasure to the senses. The word go has two meanings. Go means cow, actually it has several meanings. Go also means your senses. The only person who can bring you pleasure to your senses is called Govinda. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without doubting, is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. Again, after talking about the Vedantas and the Vedas, Krishna again comes back to Bhakti Yoga. He says those who are his devotees, they know that Krishna is the Supreme. They don't have any doubt about it. And because they know Krishna is the Supreme, they know everything. They don't have to search for any more knowledge. They don't have to have any more perfection of knowledge. He therefore engages himself in devotional service, O son of Bharata. Once you found the ultimate jewel, like Dhruva Maharaj says, right? You are the diamond. Once you found the diamond, why will you worship anything else? You'll stop worshipping all of the other trinkets. Once you found the diamond, you'll want to be with the diamond. Last shloka. Again, Krishna talks about the fact that whatever he has said here is also confidential. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. So as Paramatma, Krishna is within us as the Chaitya Guru. He's giving you an opportunity to understand him. So we read these shlokas, we'll just read the Sanskrit shlokas. Na tad bhashayate suryo na shashanko na pavakah yad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. So once you reach the spiritual world, Krishna says, no more birth for you. Done, you're over. So some of us may have doubts, if we are like this Nitya Baddhas, if we go back to the spiritual world by the mercy of the Lord or by mercy of Guru, what is the chance that I may do the same mistake again and come back? Krishna says, not possible. Once you go back to the spiritual world, you're done. You've become a Nitya Siddha now. No longer a Nitya Baddha. Krishna is guaranteeing those who reach it never return to this material world. Mamayavamsho jiva loke. So he's establishing the connection between him as the Bhagwan and the Jivatmas. We are fragmental parts of Krishna. We are separated from him, and now we are stuck in this material world. So the process of Krishna consciousness is simply to reconnect you with Krishna. If you don't reconnect with Krishna, Krishna says, there is only going to be bondage and you're going to constantly transmigrate. Your soul is going to occupy n number of bodies as per its desires. Mamaivamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanah manashashtani indriyani prakritistani karshati. Because of our conditioning and because we are always carrying so many desires within us, we are constantly struggling with our senses and mind. So unless we exercise self-discipline and self-discovery and add to it devotion, we will not be able to break free of the chains. Shariram yadavapnoti yachapya utkramatishvarah grihitvaitani samyati vayurgandhani vashayat. The living entity in the material world, because of his desires that he's carrying from his previous births and impressions that he's carrying from his previous births, it's like the air carrying the aroma, and that decides what body you take. Then you occupy that body. Once you give up that body, you'll just take up another body. So this is a cycle of reincarnation. The living entity thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. And then Krishna says, if you're a fool, you're not going to understand this. However, if your eyes are trained by knowledge, then you can see through this illusion. And then Krishna talks about his supremacy, how he maintains everything. His energy is causing the planets to stay exactly where they are. And Prabhupada uses this analogy. If the sun globe were just a few millimeters closer to the earth, it'll be chaotic. If the sun globe was a few millimeters away from the earth, that'll also create chaos. So this perfection of the planets and the planetary systems and how they are rotating about in this huge material cosmos is something that is inconceivable to us. We cannot even understand it. We are just one small speck in one big Brahmanda, just one Brahmanda. And like this, there are billions and billions of Brahmandas. The Acharyas say it's like a huge bag of mustard seeds. Imagine. A huge bag of mustard seeds. That's how many Brahmandas are there in the cosmos, in the material cosmos. Then Krishna gives examples. If you're not convinced that you can't breathe without him supplying the air, you can't survive without the sun and the moon, you can't survive without food. You may be a greatest personality, but you're completely dependent on the Lord through material nature. Aditya Gatam Tejo, splendor of the sun. Gama Vishyacha Bhutani, he maintains all of the various planets. Pushnami Chaushadihi Sarvaha, he supplies the juice of life to all the vegetables through the moon. Vaivashnara, the fire of digestion. Prana Pana Samayuktaha, Pacham Annam, to digest the food stuff. Even the air is necessary to help in your digestion, your breathing. That is also done by the Lord. You think you are breathing on your own. You're breathing because of the help of the Lord. And then as if to move from the bodily platform to come up, the more subtle platform, Krishna is saying, forget the body, I'm maintaining your body. But I also can influence your mind if you allow me to as the Paramatma. And from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. And from there, through Jnana Chakshu, the soul can understand that it is trapped and it needs a GPS system to get out of this world. The GPS system is the Vedas. So he is the maintainer of the soul, the essence of Vedas or Vedanta Sutra in 16, 17, and 18. Dvavimau purushau loke ksharascha evacha ksharak sarvani bhutani khutasto kshara uchyate. So two classes of being, Nitya Siddha and Nitya Baddha. Nitya Siddhas reside in the spiritual world, Nitya Baddhas are occupying the material cosmos. Fallible and infallible. The only difference, the fallible, the Nitya Baddhas, want to enjoy themselves independently from Krishna, and to do that they come into contact with Prakriti. The infallible ones, they always want to enjoy themselves with Krishna, therefore they never leave the spiritual world. So you can enjoy yourself with Krishna even in this material world. So not all Jivatmas in the material cosmos are Nitya Baddhas. So great acharyas like Srila Prabhupada, they are actually Nitya Siddhas, but they have been sent by the Lord to coax Jivatmas to come back. So we cannot say that the acharyas are Nitya Baddhas. They are not. They've come here for a specific purpose. Your guru is also not a Nitya Baddha. He is a Nitya Siddha. He's come specifically to, pull you by your ears back to the spiritual world, because we don't want to go on our own. Uttama purushastvananyaha paramatmeti udahritaha yo lokatrayam avishya bhibarti avyaya ishvaraha. So now Krishna talks about there are two kinds of jivatmas, Nitya Siddha and Nitya Baddha, and then there is Paramatma, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining all of it with perfection. Then he then talks about himself as Bhagavan. Yasmat ksharamati akshara chottamaha atosmi loka vedecha pratitah purushottama. So the title of this chapter comes from this word, Purushottama, the original Purusha, Krishna. Because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person, Krishna. So this is a quick view of the chapter. So as I mentioned, the acronym for today is GPS. The GPS is the actual Vedas themselves. For those who are not ready to accept the Supreme Lord, simply by following the Vedas, they can ultimately reach the right conclusion by achieving Jnana Chakshu. So this is a summary. The word Ashwata, as I mentioned, has two meanings. The word Ashwata is a name for banyan tree. And it is also means, it literally means that which will not be here tomorrow. In other words, that which is temporary. So the material world is like a hotel. The real home is in the spiritual world. The question is, do we want to check out from here? So this is the summary of chapter 15. Interestingly, this chapter is, chapter 15 is recited in the year when, as per the Vaishnava calendar, we have the Purushottam month, which is every once in 2.5, 3 years, we get an additional month as per the moon calendar, not as per the sun calendar. If you are following the moon calendar, you get an extra month. That month is called Purushottam month. And in that Purushottam month that comes once in 3 years, approximately, in that month, you're supposed to read this chapter every day, 20 shlokas. One can also try and memorize this chapter of Purushottama Yoga, the yoga of the Supreme Lord. So just a quick summary before we close for the day. What is the essence of all of the Vedanta is in the Trishloke Gita. 2 types of jivas, Kshara and Akshara, which is fallible and infallible, which is the same as Nitya Baddha and Nitya Siddha. The importance of the Paramatma, and finally how Krishna himself maintains everything. By knowing Krishna, we know everything. And then Krishna concludes by saying this is the most confidential chapter. So how we can attain liberation by detachment? If we don't do that, then we are trapped in the cycle of bondage and transmigration. How Krishna actually assists us even in the material world, and also assists us in our spiritual endeavors. So this is a quick summary of this chapter. So we'll stop here, and I will take any